Ethan Walker adjusted the brim of his ball cap, the sun's reflection bouncing off the freshly waxed hood of his Tesla. The smell of cut grass drifted in the spring breeze as he looked out over his modest but modern ranch-style home in Crestmont Hills, a neighborhood that prided itself on pristine lawns and color-coordinated mailboxes. But Ethan had a different kind of pride. As a systems engineer with a degree in renewable energy, he saw potential where others saw routine. And in that moment, he saw the sun as the ultimate power source and the key to future-proofing his home. He'd spent months fine-tuning the blueprint, an integrated solar array with energy storage, smart inverters, and a self-sufficient grid backup. It wasn't just a project. It was his legacy. His plan was to install it quietly over the next 2 weeks and become the first home in Crestmont to go completely off-grid. As he scrolled through the specs on his tablet, a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. This wasn't just about saving on electric bills. It was about proving a point. Technology could coexist with suburbia. And with California's incentives, it was practically a crime not to go solar. The first delivery truck pulled up that afternoon. As the driver began unloading the sleek, high-efficiency panels onto the driveway, Ethan's phone buzzed with a notification. City permit approved. Everything was in place. No hiccups, no red tape, just the way he liked it. But then came the voice, shrill, commanding, with the subtle grace of nails on a chalkboard. "Excuse me," she barked, walking across the street in perfectly pressed khakis and a pastel visor. "Are you the homeowner?" Ethan turned slowly. His gut twitched. The woman stood with her arms folded, a clipboard clutched tightly in one hand, and a visible scowl stretching her lips. She had the kind of energy that could curdle milk from 10 feet away. "I'm Karen McCauley," she said sharply. "President of the—" She paused with dramatic flair. "Crestmont Community Council." Ethan blinked. That wasn't a thing. There was no registered HOA in Crestmont, at least not on paper. But as her eyes locked onto the solar panels, he felt a chill crawl up his spine. Something about her didn't feel like a neighbor concerned with aesthetics. Something about her felt like a problem, and Ethan had just triggered it. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. All right, let's keep going. Ethan hadn't even finished unstrapping the first solar panel when a second woman arrived. Tall, wiry, wearing oversized sunglasses and a golden retriever leash like it was a badge of honor. Behind her trailed a balding man in socks and sandals, gripping a thick binder labeled Crestmont Standards. Karen hadn't come alone. "That's Linda," she said without breaking eye contact. "Our treasurer. And that's Howard. He manages compliance." "Compliance? With what?" Ethan asked flatly. Karen sniffed like she'd just walked into a room that offended her. "The rules. Page 43, Section 9. No alterations to visible rooftops without council approval. Solar panels are considered obstructions." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Council? What council?" Karen smirked. "The Crestmont Community Council. We've been managing the neighborhood for the past 3 years. Informally, of course, but effectively." There it was. The twist: Ethan had done his research before buying this house. There was no legal HOA, no governing body. Just a group of bored, power-hungry neighbors playing City Hall in their spare time. And now they were standing on his property, pretending to wield authority. "Ma'am," he said, keeping his tone calm but clipped, "this property is zoned residential, and the city has already approved the solar installation. You're not a recognized entity under municipal or state code. You're what exactly? A cosplay HOA?" Karen's smile turned to stone. "You can laugh now," she said. "But non-compliance has consequences." "Like what?" Ethan asked, folding his arms. "You gonna write me a strongly worded letter?" Behind her, Howard unzipped the binder and handed over a document titled Notice of Violation. Printed in Comic Sans, Ethan stared at it, dumbfounded. They weren't just pretending. They'd created an entire bureaucracy out of thin air as the truck driver nervously asked where to place the panels. Karen stepped forward, placing herself between him and the driveway. "We won't be needing these," she said firmly. "Delivery denied." Ethan's blood ran cold. Not out of fear, but calculation. These people were escalating fast, and while they had no legal power, that didn't mean they couldn't become a real problem, a dangerous one. "I suggest you stop now," Karen warned, her tone now quiet and icy. "Before this gets messy." Ethan gave a tight smile. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." He turned and walked into his garage, past the shelves of electrical tools, CAD designs, and his private server. Karen thought she was playing chess. But Ethan, he was building the board. By Monday morning, Ethan had copies of every permit neatly printed, signed, and laminated, just in case someone decided to accidentally spill coffee on them. Zoning clearance, energy compliance, noise level authorization. Check, check, and check. It wasn't just paperwork, it was a shield. He wasn't just installing solar panels, he was declaring war by legal precision. The panels arrived in full force the next day, escorted by a licensed contractor Ethan had worked with before, Carl, a no-nonsense veteran with more tattoos than patience. As Carl and his crew started unloading gear, a shriek sliced through the neighborhood like a fire alarm. "That's a hazard to air traffic," Karen shouted from across the street, storming toward the house with her binder in one hand and a smartphone in the other. "Do you even know how sunlight reflects off those things? It can blind birds, or pilots." Carl paused mid-drill. "You serious?" "Oh, she's dead serious," Ethan muttered, stepping between them before things escalated. Karen wasn't alone. Her fake HOA brigade had returned in full force. Linda with her clipboard, Howard lugging a folding chair, and now a new face. Doug, the self-appointed environmental compliance officer, who claimed solar panels altered migratory patterns of monarch butterflies. Ethan had to fight back a smirk. "Monarch butterflies? Let me get this straight," he said, holding up the official city seal on his permit. "You're claiming this violates winged insect protocol?" Karen narrowed her eyes. "Don't patronize us. This neighborhood has standards. We built this community with rules that protect our visual harmony. You can't just slap a space station on your roof." That was a new one. Ethan logged it mentally. Space station. What the FHOA lacked in authority, they made up for in persistence. Over the next few days, Karen filed complaints with the city inspector's office, emailed the county energy board, and even tried flagging the delivery trucks with unregistered access to residential zones. None of it stuck. Ethan had done everything by the book. Still, delays piled up. One city official hesitated after receiving what he called dozens of community objections. Ethan had to resend documentation, attend a zoning meeting, and answer whether his panels were cosmetically disruptive. He kept his composure, but inside, the pressure built. Karen wasn't trying to win legally. She was trying to wear him down. Every day, every hour, she could delay construction chipped away at his resolve. But Ethan wasn't wired to break. He wasn't just fighting for his panels, he was fighting to expose something far more dangerous. Because if they could fake an HOA, how far would they go next? Ethan knew better than to meet madness with rage. Where Karen used volume, he used precision. Where the FHOA threw tantrums, Ethan drafted blueprints. Every complaint, every confrontation. He recorded it all. Phone calls, doorstep tirades, even their strange mailbox flyers titled "The Truth About Solar Radiation." He archived each moment like puzzle pieces. The walls of his home office became a silent war room. Printouts of city code, satellite maps, power usage charts. But it was the middle of one sleepless night, surrounded by coffee cups and legal pads, that the idea came to him. Not just a defense, but a counterstrike. The panels he'd ordered were already top-tier, high-efficiency monocrystalline with adaptive shading tech. But buried deep in their optional modules was an experimental upgrade, microinverters linked with a local AI feedback system. It wasn't commercially used yet, but Ethan had the beta firmware because he helped design it during a previous freelance contract. The upgrade wouldn't just power his house, it would create a smart energy loop that could detect outages, reroute power, and monitor neighborhood grid demand. If the city approved, Ethan's home could serve as a community backup hub during blackouts. The catch? Karen and her gang would need his house to keep their lights on. He smirked at the thought, while Carl resumed work during brief pauses in Karen's interference. Ethan filed a quiet petition with the County Renewable Energy Office. He proposed a pilot program, citing rising energy instability. He submitted impact studies, load distribution models, and even pulled drone footage, which Karen once claimed was NSA surveillance, to show the viability. The FHOA was too busy arguing about solar glare to notice. By the end of the week, Ethan had something stronger than a permit. He had momentum. The city flagged his house as a possible green node for future integration. Still unofficial, but enough to stir curiosity among city planners and council members. He made no announcements, no social media posts. Silence was the deadliest circuit. And all the while, Karen kept screaming about birds. But Ethan was done playing defense. The next phase wasn't about panels, it was about power, not just electrical, but political. Karen thought she was winning because he hadn't retaliated. She didn't realize the engineer had just flipped the switch. It started with a flicker. Carl's crew had finished anchoring the final panel when the inverter display blinked twice and went dark. Ethan was on the porch, coffee in hand, when Carl called out, "Hey, you seeing this? That's not supposed to happen." Ethan frowned. The wiring had been triple-checked. System diagnostics were clean. The odds of a spontaneous failure were almost zero. He strode to the box and opened the panel, then froze. The main conduit had been sliced, not clumsily. Precisely. His brain shifted into engineer mode. Wire gauge, cut depth, blade angle. This wasn't an accident. Someone knew exactly where to target, just enough to disable, not destroy. Sabotage. And Karen? She was conveniently out walking her Pomeranian, wearing oversized sunglasses and an innocent smirk, like a soap opera villain. "Problem with your space station?" she called out, voice honey-sweet. Ethan didn't flinch. "Nope, just updating firmware." Inside, his blood ran ice-cold. He had installed a tamper detection relay just days before, one of the hidden safeguards in his AI-enhanced panel system. It didn't just detect disruptions, it recorded them. Back in his home office, Ethan pulled up the security feed. Sure enough, grainy footage captured someone sneaking into the yard at 3:42 a.m. Hood up, gloves on. The figure crouched at the base of the system, snipping wires with chilling efficiency. The camera's low-light mode pinged facial markers, and while the hoodie masked most of the face, a telltale sparkle gave her away. Those ridiculous rhinestone sneakers Karen always wore on her late-night trash runs, but Ethan didn't call the cops. Not yet. He waited. 3 hours later, a city inspector showed up unannounced. "We received a report that your solar rig is leaking electromagnetic interference. It's causing disruption to neighborhood Wi-Fi." Ethan raised a brow. "From a non-functioning system?" The inspector scratched his head. "You've got the permits. Everything looks clean. But protocol says I have to document the complaint." Ethan handed him a flash drive. "You'll want to see this. It's footage from last night." The inspector plugged it into his tablet. As the video played, his eyes narrowed. Karen had made her move. and Ethan had just exposed her on a government device. As the inspector walked off, visibly rattled, Ethan stood in the silence of his yard, wind rustling through the half-installed panels. The trap had been triggered. Now, all he had to do was wait for the fallout. Ethan didn't storm the gates. He didn't rant online or stage a protest. That wasn't his way. Instead, he booked a 5-minute public comment slot at the upcoming City Planning Commission meeting. A sleepy Tuesday session where permits and zoning usually flew under the radar. But Ethan came armed like it was war. The one chamber was half full. A few retirees, a local journalist, and, perched near the back like a vulture in pearls, Karen. She hadn't expected him to show. She definitely didn't expect what came next. Ethan stood at the podium and plugged in a USB drive. "Good evening. My name is Ethan Reyes. I'm a licensed engineer and homeowner in the Brookridge neighborhood. I'm here to speak not just for myself, but for every resident who's been harassed, misled, or manipulated by a self-appointed group that calls themselves the Brookridge Neighborhood Standards Committee." The screen behind him flickered on. First, audio clips. Karen's voice on speakerphone. "You can file all the permits you want, sweetheart? We are the rules here." Then video footage, her cutting through his panel wiring under cover of darkness, unmistakable in her rhinestone sneakers. Next, documents, emails from city officials confirming no legal HOA existed, screenshots of fake violation letters forged with a phony logo. Each slide landed like a hammer. Gasps filled the chamber. One of the city council members leaned forward, murmuring, "Is that Karen DeVries?" Karen's face blanched. She stood up abruptly, muttering, "This is slander. He's fabricating all of this." But her voice cracked beneath the weight of proof. "I've also submitted a full report to the county registrar," Ethan continued calmly, "along with a petition signed by 10 residents to request an official investigation into fraudulent code enforcement, impersonation of a homeowners association, and malicious property interference." The room buzzed. A neighbor in the third row, Mr. Halverson, who Karen had once fined for painting his shed beige instead of taupe, stood and clapped. One by one, others followed. Karen turned to leave, but the city clerk stopped her. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to stay behind for a few questions." Ethan stepped down from the podium, his heart thudding, not from nerves, but from something deeper. Justice wasn't loud. It was methodical. He walked past Karen as she fumbled with her bag, her hands trembling. She didn't look at him, but he didn't need her to. The tide had turned, and the fake HOA was officially crumbling. 3 weeks later, the neighborhood looked the same, but everything had changed. The old signs labeled Brookridge Neighborhood Standards Enforced had mysteriously vanished overnight. Karen's oversized lawn gnomes were gone too, along with her smug little clipboard walks. No one saw her much anymore, just the occasional twitch of curtains behind her front window. But Ethan was everywhere. The final solar panels clicked into place on his roof under the soft morning sun. He tightened the last mounting bolt with surgical precision, wiped sweat from his brow, and stepped back. It was done. Not just installed, but operational, clean, silent energy flowing directly into his custom-engineered battery system. He stood before the control hub in his garage, a sleek panel pulsing with readouts and stats. His voice was calm, but proud. "System online. Grid tied. Battery. Backup. Overproduction routed to communal backup junction box." He flipped the switch. All across the block, tiny lights blinked to life, LED path lights that had never worked before. Porch lamps glowed softly in the daytime, signaling life. The old community charging station near the playground previously, a rusting relic, buzzed faintly, powered by Ethan's new network. The neighbors noticed, and then they came. Mrs. Alvarez from 2 houses down approached him that evening with a pie in one hand and a question in the other. Would you consider helping me set up panels on my garage? I've always wanted to go solar, but Karen said, we'd be fined. Ethan smiled. There's no HOA, no fines, just sunlight. That night, 3 more families knocked on his door, not with complaints, but curiosity, ideas, hope. Ethan didn't charge them. He didn't give them lectures, either. He invited them to look over his plans, showed them the modular layout he'd designed for scalability, and let them decide for themselves. His goal was never control. It was freedom, sustainability, truth. One kid, maybe 10 years old, pointed at the roof and asked, "Are you like Iron Man or something?" Ethan laughed. "Not quite, but I do build things to make life better." From inside, his monitor blinked, battery reserves rising, grid demand lowering. The system was more efficient than even he'd predicted, and with a few more setups on nearby homes, it could begin stabilizing the entire block's demand footprint. The irony didn't escape him. Karen had tried to stop him to preserve control, but in the end, he didn't just power his home. He'd sparked a movement. And somewhere, behind closed blinds, Karen watched her kingdom fade under a sunrise she couldn't stop. It happened 2 weeks after the solar grid lit up the block. A freak thunderstorm tore through the town just after midnight. Lightning slashed the sky like jagged scars. Thunder shook windows, and with a single deafening crack, the city's aging transformer blew. The neighborhood plunged into darkness, except for one house, Ethan's. The soft hum of his system kicked in without a hitch, routing energy from his battery reserves. Lights flickered on, his security cameras rebooted. Even the little digital weather station in his hallway kept ticking. He stood by the window, sipping coffee in a hoodie, watching the rain slam against the glass. Then came the knock. He knew before opening the door. Karen. Her makeup was smudged from the rain, her arms crossed, a flashlight flickering in one trembling hand. Her voice was quieter than he'd ever heard it. "My house, it's completely out. The sump pump's dead. I'm afraid the basement might flood." Ethan blinked. No clipboard, no smug stare. Just a woman standing in a storm, stripped of her power, literally and figuratively. He could have turned her away. No one would have blamed him. After the fake fines, the sabotage, the calls to the city, he had every reason to say no, but he didn't. "Come in," he said simply. Karen hesitated. The pride in her eyes flared for a second before it broke. She stepped inside, shivering. Ethan guided her to the backup port he'd quietly installed on the edge of his driveway, originally meant for emergency crews. He grabbed a heavy-duty extension line, walked it out, and connected it to an external port on her side of the property. He knew her house's layout. He'd studied it when she accused him of panel overhangs. That irony wasn't lost on him now. The lights in her house blinked on. The sump pump groaned to life. Power flowed. Karen stood in stunned silence, staring into the rain, back toward her glowing windows. "You didn't have to do this," she muttered. "I know," Ethan replied. "But someone had to be the grown-up." There was no smugness in his voice, just calm control. The kind of control you earn, not demand. The storm began to ease. In the distance, power crews scrambled to restore the grid. But here, under Ethan's quiet solar shield, the block pulsed with quiet light. As Karen turned to leave, she paused. "For what it's worth, I was wrong." Ethan gave a small nod. "You were, but now you're part of the system." And just like that, the sun began to rise. A new day, a brighter one. Powered not by control, but by character, and an engineer who knew exactly when to let logic speak louder than revenge. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the next part, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated. See you in the next one. Your support means the world.